I'm Miles Lenz, and I just cut the shit out of my hand with a carpet blade. But ignore that. So, yeah, don't pay attention to the tissue I'm holding this whole time. It's gonna not be important. Probably won't be holding it in most parts of the video. Well, basically, introduction to punk. Yeah. Music has influenced society since the creation of both. However, I'd argue none has influenced it as much as punk music. Its roots are in American garage rock and British glam and pub rock. And as counterculture continued in both places up into the late 60s, it needed a new face and a new voice, so to say. Representation for what they stood for. As this was happening, something very unexpected occurred. American garage rock started taking off. More people started listening to amateur bands with unique perspectives instead of larger bands signed with big record labels. This led to proto-punk and the start of the traditional punk genre, if you can call anything about punk traditional.
Hello, ladies.
Punk, at the time, punk was more a label for bands that didn't really fit into other genres. Since they didn't have a wealth of genres as we do today, they were just kind of labeled punk, and that was that. This led to early punk having a very unique sound. And increasing in popularity even more due to this. There is a little bit of a controversial debate as to where punk started. Some say it started in the grimy garages of America, and some say it started in the piss-soaked pubs of the UK. But either way, if it weren't for both these countries, punk definitely wouldn't have evolved into what it did. Without the Sex Pistols, would we have the same kind of anti-establishment sentiment in the punk genre? I really don't think so. And without, like, the Dead Kennedys, would punk be associated with satire as much as it is? I also don't think so. So they both put in did a lot for punk's overall development and really led to what we have in the golden age of punk. And even today, in some places of underground punk.
I wanna be what I wanna, yeah. I wanna be with. I wanna be with. I wanna be what I
I really don't care which country made punk first. It just showed kind of both countries had something in common, being tired of the status quo and wanting something better, some sort of change. This is what's at the heart of punk. This is what, like, that countercultural fervor that took over both countries for the 70s through the 90s kind of was about. And yeah, that's what I'd call punk.
It's been a long time since we've been here. This one's called Let's Start a War.
Punk had a very interesting lifespan, however. It was popular in it became popular in the 70s and 80s due to increasing anti-authority sentiment and a lot of the social movement in the 60s. It definitely didn't die off, so to say, in the 90s. However, it was never the same as the 70s and 80s punk scene. It more went underground. In my personal opinion, early punk, or the silver age of punk, died with the death of Sid Vicious, lead singer of the Sex Pistols. The Sex Pistols were one of the earliest really big names in punk, and they made classics like Anarchy in the UK, and God Save the Queen, which enjoyed a resurgence in popularity due to her death. Which, yeah, they're still in the public conscious today, even. It's just amazing. The death was a horrible tragedy in the scene, though, and his name will not be forgotten by the many punks that came after him, for sure. Moving into what I think is the golden age of punk, the 80s, like, they had bands like Black Flag, TSOL or the Sons of New Liberty, the Circle Jerks, the Replacements, the Dead Kennedys, Bad Brains, and many, many more. It was such a time for punk. The 80s scene was going hard. There was even like bigger bands such as Danny Elfman, who's now a popular composer. His band back in the 80s, Oingo Boingo, was even making punk at the time, and they're personally one of my favorite bands of all time, so it led to a lot of great things in the music scene, for sure. Those were just the really popular ones as well. There are many others that kept punk alive, even in underground venues all over the world to this day. If you ever get the chance to do some research online and maybe find a venue close to you, find a cool venue, might have a good night. Moving on to the 90s, however, I wouldn't say it killed punk, but it definitely went back underground. Of course, there are bands like Green Day and The Offspring, and I think they're pretty okay, but many diehard punks found those bands too corporate due to their association with big record labels. Thus, punk was banished to the underground once more. However, some say it will rise again. Yeah, punk is an amazing genre. If you haven't listened to the classics, you definitely should. Just look up like an 80s, 90s playlist, listen to some of the bands maybe I mentioned. They're very good. I recommend them. And I doubt this will be unlisted, so thanks.
And you get more ideas and everything. The thing with the Exploited, like there's so many bands just like for 5 years like take Discharge, right? They play the same thing like as fast as they can for like 5 years, but with the Exploited, like they've got ideas as well as the speed of the music, and that's why they're still as good as they are.
Lots of speed. Where do you think punk's going to go from here? I mean, where do you think it can go now?
I don't know. Well, like at the moment, like punk, from like 12 months ago, it's split into two, right? You've got real hardcore punk. You've got like bands like The Exploited and Discharge going in one direction as fast as it can. And you've got like other bands. You've got like positive punk, like the Batcave punk, like bands like Alien Sex Fiend going the other way. And, like it's splitting in two directions. And like the subs are like trying to go like in between it, because like the slow sort has got its good ideas and the fast sort has got its good ideas as well. So like we're trying to get the best we can from both sides.